most people throw money into short-term rentals because they heard a market was hot. But if you know anything about me, I like the data to make decisions for me. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how I researched the Gainesville, Florida market, the tools I used, the numbers I referenced, and how you can do it in any city. First, why is this important? Whether you're buying, arbitraging, co-hosting, knowing your market is non-negotiable. You're gonna wanna know exactly what types of properties are working, what kind of guests are coming there, and if the cash flow actually justifies the investment. So here's the process I followed start to finish to validate Gainesville as a short-term rental opportunity. And y'all, just a disclaimer for this video, I used data directly from Airbnb, I used Excel sheets, and I also used Price Labs market dashboards. And something like Google Sheets would suffice. Price Labs also for the market dashboards, it's like $10 a month for one market at 1,000 listings, right? Which is just way more than you'd ever need. Same, just specifically for Gainesville as well. So yeah, that's the only stipulations. Okay, y'all, so this is exactly what I did. So for reference, I managed some short-term rentals here in Gainesville, Florida. I had a new person come to me and say that they wanted to start short-term renting. So I decided to do some market research in their area. I literally just came on to Airbnb, typed in Gainesville. Right, this house, the plan is it's like a 4-bed, 3-bath. Our plan is to sleep like 10 to 12, right? So I just put Gainesville, put flexible. I like to just click every month here on the bottom and hit weekend guests. Obviously, we're going for 10, 12, so we click that. And then, how cool is that? This is actually my Airbnb. How freaking sick is that? Okay, anyway. So, this home is located across from the golf course, a little bit more centralized. So I scrolled in here and got a little bit of a closer view. As you can tell, right, even when we go out a little bit, there's, 100 homes in this entire map area, right? Which is not super, super large, right? Originally, I'm gonna be honest, I like to say that N equals 30, right? That was a good reference for population statistics, but I forgot very key part that it's supposed to be randomly selected and independent and whatever the actual rules are. So let's just say this is just a more specialized sample, right, of what goes on in this local area across from the golf course. So whatever. So I took these homes, right, just started off with that filter and just started putting them into a wish list, right? So if you click this little button on the top, you can put them in a wish list. I put this into respective Airbnb's wish list and did that. So basically just went through it, just kind of liked all of them just to start, right? Just liked, put them all in, right? Then you get a wish list. So the importance of a wish list is obviously it just organizes the data for you. It also has other cool features that you could, for example, change the dates that you're looking for specifically. So say like in the short term, if I'm trying to get a sense of how booked these places are for a weekend in August, we can just go and say, we can go and look, right? And it'll show us the homes that are unavailable for those date ranges, the ones that are, right? So we could then reference like, hey, these properties down here rented at this price, or they're doing something better, or, so on and so forth. Okay, y'all, and in my brain, that was already 3 steps. First step, you actually went on Airbnb, you looked at the town. Second, you filtered for the listings, right? You did the guest count, you looked at beds, whatever you want to filter for. The third is you actually grabbed the listings in the search results, right, and put them in a wish list. Okay, and for step 4, it's important to note that I use Price Labs, right? That's a really great dynamic pricing software, but they also have market dashboards, which I'll show you here in a second. So basically, now that we have our data in our wish list, you just click on this, right? You get a little link at the top. You can actually filter listings in the market dashboard by the link. It just doesn't seem to work. So what I did instead is at the top in this little link, there's these numbers here. So I copied these numbers, went to Price Labs, our market dashboard here, and I didn't use a link because it doesn't work. And instead I just used this little listing ID, right? So you copy that number and then boom, you get a listing, you get all of its data. And from there, I click this little box in the corner, take this, and then boom, it gives you the option to generate a comp set. So if you do this for every property in this wish list, right, you would eventually have a list of all of the properties you just found. Okay, and something important to note is that I actually went back into this list and I filtered the current wish list that we had, right? So I took the wish list that we had originally, put all of that data into Price Labs, and then I went back into Airbnb to validate the data, right? So for example, if we go back into this wish list, right? This is a really good property. I already have it open over here. So I'm looking for the best of the best. I'm looking for properties that are actually performing. I'm trying to get an actual idea of properties that are performing consistently and actually getting bookings like during the week and getting them, in the short term as well as the long term, and just get a better idea of what's going on, right? So this is a really good property. This is hosted by Jess. Her co-host is a guy named Geary, I believe it is, and he owns a company as well, a property management company here in Gainesville, Florida. He does a really good job. His listings are always really, really beautiful. So this is one of the higher performers. And as we could see, to validate this, right, we go to the recent reviews. We see a review 2 weeks ago. We see one in June, another one in June, 3 weeks ago, right? And to even go further, if we filter by most recent, 1 week ago, 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago, right? So this to me is screaming, okay, they're doing bookings in the short term, right? They have some long-term bookings as well. If you look at this calendar, right, we have today's the 7th, so there's one next week. This whole 2 weeks, this whole week is already filled up. We have some dates in the future booked, probably for like game days and stuff. It's here in November, right? December just might have the calendar blocked off, but you get what I'm trying to say. This is a good way to validate the data, right? And then I specifically excluded listings that kind of looked like this, right? So we just went back to that original search when I zoomed in, and you can see some of these aren't hearted, but originally I did have them hearted in my wish list. So let's just pick one of these, and I think maybe this is a good one. So this was one originally. You go back and you look, and you could see, okay, it doesn't seem like they have a photo tour. Oh, actually, yes, they do. I'm sorry, that's not relevant at all. So just forget I said that. But the first thing I'd really do is just go to the reviews, right? And we're seeing, May 2025, okay, June 2025, okay. But then we have March, February, August 2024, right? So just in the ones that are being advertised in Airbnb, we have reviews that are over a year old, right? And if we go to most recent, it kind of validates this, right? So we have one in June, one in May, one in March, one in February, and one in January, and then we're already into 2024. So this to me just screams like, maybe they're not doing as much volume, maybe this isn't a viable candidate, and it doesn't give a real sense of how the market, what the actual market demand is or how well you can actually do, right? So I chose to exclude these. There is some other things to consider with these kind of listings, right? Obviously this is, something that can be scooped up, but I to me, it's just not something that to be considered for the specific use case, right? So we excluded that. Okay, so now if we go to the actual purpose that I used PriceLab for, other than actually being able to manage the data and just have it a little more organized and get a lot of really cool insights, you also, unfortunately, right, when you look at these homes for pricing data, with Airbnb's new update, as you can see, prices include all fees, right? So previously you could click on this house, right? And you can scroll down for market research purposes and put in a date range, and you could see the prices broke down, right? It would tell you like the nightly price and the fees and whatever. Now they just implement all the fees into one little thing, right? So when you're trying to compare prices from Monday to Wednesday, obviously this is 1039. You go here, okay, this is 1372 for 2 nights, right? So obviously a cleaning fee's in there. There's obviously some other things potentially in there that you wouldn't know about. So it gets really difficult to get an actual idea of what things are priced at, right? Because obviously, look, these are 930, these are weekend prices. This is going to be different. So it gets really hard because a lot of these hosts, they're going to be using dynamic pricing, right? Or pricing that changes in some sort of flexible way. So I thought that a really good solution to this was to use Price Labs, right? Because they obviously, when you filter these listings, they're going to give you an average price, right? And what I actually did is I took this average price, I made a little Excel sheet for it, right? If you scroll down to this, the data that they show you, you get a day of week price factor, right? So I basically reverse engineered this to get idea of what the weekday pricing was and what the weekend pricing was, right? So I'll show you that little Excel sheet for that, right? So, okay, and just for a little bit better of an example for this price factoring, because I kind of was confusing myself. Basically, what I did was, right, like if the base price, if we scroll up here, when we look at this listing, is 300 or 303, right? I'm just gonna use 300. I put this in as the base price. I multiplied that by 7, right? And I took a total factored price, right? So ideally, if our base price is 300, what we'd expect is that for like dynamic pricing purposes, we have a base price of 300, and then our dynamic pricing manipulates that data throughout the week, or based on how far or how close the date is and all these other factors, right? But generally, we would expect the base price 300 across 7 days before it gets manipulated, right? So I used this data, right? The same little comp set that we made, right? And filtered through. I then took the data specifically from those 15 listings, and one of these cool little charts is a day of the week price factor, right? So, like I said, we have a base price of 300, and before it's manipulated, it's 300 across the week. Then there's a day of week price factor, right? So if it's 300, obviously it looks like Thursday, Friday, Saturday, they're going to be priced higher, right? So they might be like, 350. On this Monday, on this Tuesday, it might be like, 250, 270, right? That's not exact math, but you just for the sake of what I'm trying to explain, that's the way that it would make sense, right? So in this Excel sheet, again, base price times 7 for the week, total factor price, right? So what I put together was that if we could take the individual factor, right, which would Sunday would be 202, divide that by the total of all the factors, we would get a percentage, right? So the 202 divided by the total factored price, you get a percentage, right? So 12% of the total factored price would make up Sunday, right? So then if we take that, percentage, multiply it by the base price times 7, which is the price we'd expect, or the total amount of revenue we'd expect to make if the entire week was booked at a base price of 300 before it was manipulated, right? If you're following me there, we would take that and then boom. So since 12% of the total factored price would account for Sunday, right? So however the price is distributed, Sunday is only 12% of that, right? So again, if 12% of the total factor price is accounted for on Sunday, if we take that same percentage of the total amount of revenue we'd expect to make in a week, we would come to the conclusion that Sunday is probably priced at $257, right? All things considered. That's how I reverse engineer the price. So then we just did that across the board for all of the days of the week. And then you could very simply take an average of Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, get a weekly average, and then take the average of Friday, Saturday, get a weekend average. A very cool, unfortunately for me when I was doing this, but for future me and for future you, there's a really good workaround currently, right? So if instead you go to Airbnb, do Airbnb.ca, right? For Canada is my assumption for that. Then same thing, you can look at, or we could just click whatever here. So we could actually, they still in Canada tell you the nightly price, or on the Canadian web browser, right? If you just, went and used the Canadian browser, do the Airbnb.ca, took the same listings, and then to use the little currency converter, you get a little bit, probably a better idea of what the actual prices are. But, these are all just averages. This is all just trying to get a sense of what things are going on, right? It's still going to be better than your, random guess, or, one listing, or, what your intuition, right? But it is not perfect. Okay, so this is actually what I did next. So once I had this data, right, then I went to this little Excel sheet over here that I made. Going to be transparent, I might put this at the start of the video as well. I'm a part of Cracking Superhost. It's a mentorship run by Sean Rakicic. I could attribute a large portion of my success to Sean Rakicic and this mentorship. He really is a genius. He does mainly rental arbitrage with Airbnb. I don't do that yet. I'll plan on doing that soon. But I kind of just had a lot of co-hosting, like property management deals kind of fall into my lap. So that's kind of my focus currently. But arbitrage looks more and more enticing as the days go on. But I say this because this is actually a modification of documents that are actually already in the program, right? So this is straight out of Sean Rakicic's brain. Not a super, overly complex Excel sheet, and I just cleaned it up and added some things like amenities and manipulate some of the formulas and such, but they just want to be transparent. Like Sean Rock is a beast. I'm a big fan of him, and he knows a lot, so I'd watch his stuff too. But I digress. Anyway, so basically, what I did was took the data, right? You could just go to the individual thing. Like, look, we'll take the treetop one, take this individual data, and you just start filling in. So this, I think, functioned as like a listing number. I didn't really use that, but oh no, just kidding. I'm sorry. This is the listing name. It's just not opened yet. So I would write like treetop, blah, 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 right? And I think it is important, right? So you could actually reference what, maybe if there's you're seeing a higher occupancy listing, it could, you want to see all the data, right? So maybe the listing is advertising something in the title, which is something you should do that is enticing to people, right? I'm not too sure if this is exactly that, other than treetop. That's kind of cool. Architectural, I don't know if retreat is really it, but treetop and architectural, that's kind of some cool words. Maybe you'd be like, oh, let me make you look twice. But whatever, that's the reason why you would kind of want to include that. Okay, so then we just copy this, put into the listing link. Did figure this out. You just have to hit the wrap text button. Go down, we go to rating right here, 5. Wait, no, guest count is 10. Beds, 5. Bedrooms was 4, baths was 3, right? Okay, so then we get to the actual pricing stuff, right? So basically what I did was took Price Labs, right? Took this price, reverse engineered it in that other sheet that I just explained, right? To get an average. So put in 300, did all this maths, got this price, right? And averaged this price out, got a weekly average, got a weekend average, right? So I did 258, and we'll just do 406. Cleaning fee, also got that information directly from Price Labs, just because it's harder to, it was hard initially because it doesn't advertise that, just all the fees into one price. But as we said, you can use a different browser and actually have that and convert the currency, and you won't have to run into the same problems I did. Okay, boom, treetop, 180. So we go here, we put 180, boom. Okay, now this is something a lot of people don't do, but it's just good as a reference point, right? To just see what your competition is doing, right? So basically we would be here, we would look like, okay, Monday, Wednesday, click here. There is no discount, right? And it would show a discount if it had it, and it would look like this, right? So if we click 1, 2, the 8th is a week discount, and see how it says this weekly stay discount in this green, right? 867. So that's how you would identify if there was like a 2-day, 3-day, 4-day, whatever day discount. I know just from doing this that they don't have anything other than a weekly and a monthly, I believe, but still you would do this. We already tried 2. We see there's no discount. You would try 3. 3 we don't have. Clear dates, 1 to 5. 4 we don't have, right? Same thing for monthly stays, right? It is a little bit harder to get sometimes because obviously a lot of times people have bookings in between, but here look, we have a monthly stay, and boom, we have a monthly stay discount, right? And an easy way to actually calculate this number, right? So for our monthly stay, we just open up our calculator here, and we would take the discount number, right? So we would take 7380, divide that by the total price, before the discount, right? 41204.68, and boom, 18%, right? So then we would go back and we would put 18%. So same thing, go back to this, clear dates, go for a week, go here, go to our calculator. So we got 1394.64 divided by the total nightly amount before the discount, which is 16158.91 equals boom, which is like, there you go, 9%, right? I mean, if you times by 100 just for reference, percentage 8.6, we're just gonna round up 9. So we will go back here, we'll put in 9, right? And then we know for it's all zeros across the board here, right? And again, this is important to note, just so you have a sense of what people are doing, what things are working, etc., right? Minimum stay length, we saw that it was 2. You could, a really easy way to check this, you can just look up here if you clear the dates, it says. But if you wanted to look you could click a night, you click this day, it'll show up. Sometimes people do set different minimums based on like weekend or weekly, or like the maybe last minute people will open up their calendars, right, to allow one night stays, because obviously that's the only way that the day's gonna get booked otherwise, which is actually a perfect example. Look, so in the near future, since these days aren't booked, or maybe since there's a weird gap in between the dates that are booked, this host actually allows you to do a one night stay, right? So that's a good thing that we checked that. And then we could see like weekends or 2 days, etc., right? So that's why you would do that. So we could say one last minute, just so you get a reference to otherwise. Just justify that, boom. Okay, now next thing we do, right? We want to get a sense of how booked these listings are, right? So this is another, just simple math, right? So we would take, today's the 9th of August. We're looking for Saturday, right? So from Saturday to Saturday, you can either do like, you can count Saturday as the first day, or do the day after Saturday and count it, right? Because obviously if you counted Saturday, that'd be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? So you wouldn't get here, or actually no, I'll count the day. I think that's just kind of easier in my brain. So booked 7 days out, right? So today's the 9th, so we'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? We would go back to our little sheet. 5 days out of the 7 are booked. 71%, boom, very cool, right? Same thing for 14. We go back, right? So we already have 5. 14 obviously would be to the 22nd. So we already have 5 as of 15, right? As of the 15th. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So we'll go back. 12 days are booked out of the 14. Boom, just really cool. Actually, last time that I did this, it was less booked. So this listing does incredible, even last minute, which you could see. Because I messed up the recording of the previous one, so I had to redo it. And as you can see, I think in like a 2-day span, they've actually been able to fill out their calendar even more, maybe for like last minute graduations going on and stuff like that. But it's just cool to see, right? And why you would do this kind of research, so you have an idea of what things are going on. So the previous data would show that in the far future, maybe they were already above like 40-50% occupied, but they make some last minute manipulations that get them occupied way higher than the average. So that's really cool to see. So we're at 12. So 28 days, 7, 14, 21, 28 is 4 weeks. We started the 9th. 1, 2, 3, 4 would be the 6th, but really the 5th, right? Because we're counting that first day. So we are at 12 as of 14 days. 1, 2. So this is 15. And then that's it. That's all we see. So 15 divided by 28. 54%, cool. Then 2 more weeks would be 42, right? So we say we're at the 6th now. See if any more days and 2 more weeks. So we actually see that nothing else is booked in the next 2 weeks. So we just keep that number. 15 divided by 42, 36%, right? So now you have a good idea of how these listings are doing, right? So last minute, they're filling up, right? They're changing their minimum stays to get 100% occupied in that 7-day period. Same thing, 14 days out, right? They're looking strong, manipulating pricing, manipulating different things to get booked, and it seems successful, right? And then even a month out, right? We're half occupied. A month and a half away, 40% occupied. So I don't know. I think that's really cool. And it's a bunch of good data, good for your reference, right? So then, if we just want to get a sense of what these, what the revenue of the listing actually is doing, we just count up the number of weekdays, right? So August 9th. Where we started. So we had I count Sunday through Thursday weekdays, right? I find that Sundays in Gainesville are super hard to get booked, unless you even with major price decreases. I'll go weeks where my whole calendar is booked except 3 out of the 4 Sundays in a month, and that would be the only reason. It wouldn't be 100%, but anyway, weekdays. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I believe it is 8. Let's see, 8, boom. And then there was 15 total days, right? So 15 divided minus 8 is what, 7? So there should be 7 left over. Okay, I think I made some sort of weird mistake, maybe because I didn't clear the dates and it kind of looked a little funky. But from the 9th to the 6th to the 15th, right? That was 5 days. That was our 7th day. Then from the 9th to the 22nd, right, that was our 14 days. That was 12. And then we only had 1 day extra after that, which would apply indefinitely. So that's why it's important to check these things, right? Because it's very easy to mess up. But anyway, so these numbers are actually 13, and 13. Then 8 and 5, that makes more sense. Okay, so that is correct. That's what that looks like. And there's this little formula that I would use, right? So basically, you just are gonna take the average weekday price. I'm gonna multiply that by the amount of weekdays plus weekend price on average times the amount of weekends booked. I'm gonna put a little parentheses around this just so no weirdness happens. Right? And then boom, you get an idea of how much this listing is making this month already, or in the last 42 days, I'm sorry. Then we just continue. I had this little section where you could look at amenities, right? Because for market research purposes, you're gonna want to know, what the heck is going on, what amenities people are offering. Like if you are going to start a new Airbnb, for example, which was the purpose of this research, you'd want to know, okay, what are people offering? What are people not offering? Where is there room for opportunity? What is the, the standard for the homes around here? So that's what we did, right? So you would go in here, has a king bed, cool. We looked from the pictures. It doesn't have a pool. It has a hot tub. We could just look through again. I've done it a couple times. We know it has no pool. Looking through. Very cool house. The pictures are so cool. Going down. We're not seeing anything, but we could say, okay, maybe if there's an amenity, you would know, okay, it's a balcony. We saw, like you could just say it's a little patio, this dedicated workspace, right? Let's see, outdoor kitchen, so sick. Jeez, so cool. Looks like that's the laundry room. Dryer washer, very cool. Looks like free parking if you wanted. This is such an aesthetic picture too. There you go, hot tub, that's the important one right there. So, no pool, we know it's a hot tub, we didn't see it as a gym. It doesn't look like it has a barbecue, right? It doesn't look like it's an EV charger or a crib. I know it does have a fire pit. And it doesn't look like pets are allowed, right? So just to validate this, we, instead of, just relying on the pictures, you actually can just look at what the amenities are. And we would see, look, private hot tub, free parking, whatever, if that was something you wanted to consider. We're scrolling, we're looking for any of these. Pack and play / travel crib. Okay, so it does have a little crib. A cool thing about this, I don't know if I had mentioned, for some reason the better listings seem to have performed these Wi-Fi tests that advertise the speed. Even though this isn't I don't consider this to be very fast, it seems that the listings that do better have it advertised. So I don't know, I think it could be something that is important for people, at least in this area, which I haven't even implemented, so I'll probably do that soon. But still, we're scrolling down here. Patio, balcony, backyard, outdoor furniture. So look, it did have a grill too, so that's good that we checked that. And that seems to be it. So let's go back. Has crib. Basically, we're just putting 1 if it has it, 0 if it's not, right? So you could understand, or it's just easier for data collection purposes, so you know what the heck is going on. And you could also perform math on these numbers, right, if you wanted to as well. And it had a barbecue. So, and then here you just have other notes, things you notice about the property, right? So, I mean, for me, I would say Geary listing, because he's a very good operator, and he has a high standard. He performs at a high level in my brain. So if I put that on a notes, I would be like, oh, okay, now I know, what's going on. And yeah, that would be it. And then you would be finished. I mean, you have all the data you could ever need. You probably spent a lot of time sifting through. And I think it's good because through sifting through all that data and actually doing the work and looking and spending all this visual, I've been getting all this visual feedback, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Basically, what I'm trying to say is just looking and doing the work, your intuition will grow, where you'll actually have a better sense of what's going on, generally speaking. So I think this is a really good way to do things, and I think it's really important. So y'all, I included this template that we went over here today, as well as the market dashboard, a PDF from Price Labs of the market statistics, the entire market of Gainesville, for your utilization. So yeah, please feel free to use that. Maybe follow along if you want to do some market research, and maybe hopefully this worked for you in other places as well. And I hope you found it useful. Hopefully it was cool. Hopefully I didn't bore you to death, and hopefully it didn't confuse you. So yeah,